este computador. Okay, so we are recording officially. I will let, I think, okay, somebody just dropped, but. And I think you probably also saw my exchange of emails with community. I don't know if you saw the response.
Yeah, so
it was overlapping with this time slot, so they could not join. But
okay, good. I see 5 participants.
Yeah.
Do we have hi guys? We are starting soon.
Yeah, we can. I think we can wait a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
It's okay.
Definitely.
No, but yes, I think overall there's a lot of interest in this topic, both from our side and from their side, which is good. So I think this can be a nice stepping stone for, you know, a collaborative project between us and community, or even for us to, you know, come up with something. For me, it will be definitely like a first touch with the topic. I've read about it, but I don't know much. So yeah, definitely interested to hear more.
Yes. Okay, so I will suggest to wait like 3-4 more minutes and then we can start. I don't see our policy team.
Yeah, we can wait a few more minutes. I don't know exactly who from our team would be joining. So we have one more. I'll just check who had confirmed on the Google invitation just to see if we should wait a lot more or not. No, I think I would say that maybe we could get started, also to not delay too much, not get too behind the schedule, if you agree.
Yes, I agree.
Perfect.
So hi everyone, officially now. Thank you so much for joining us today on this, as we would describe it, internal event or internal training that I can promise you will be very interesting and fun for all of us. As you already know, the next 60 minutes will be dedicated around the topic of just transition for a fair and inclusive low carbon future, which I believe is very important for us as a young generation, because we know that the low carbon future is already happening, and it can be successful only if we conduct it as a fair and inclusive way. I really don't want to take up any more of the planned time, as also Bea said. So I would just say thank you, Simona, for accepting this invitation to be here today with us to share your personal and professional experience, and of course, welcome.
Thank you very much, Pepa, and hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here today. Without further ado, we're just gonna go into the presentation, and thanks, Pippa, for clicking the slides. So just very quickly, I guess my my involvement in the field is from a social justice and climate justice point of view. I try to capture points that would be interesting both for you as a community, but I'm sure that I can learn a lot um, throughout this process from you as well. So we'll make it interactive. So we'll just start with a few updates before we jump into the definition of just transition. And then we'll talk about why do we need it, how do we enact it, and we'll brush upon what's happening in the European Union and on the European Union's periphery in terms of just transition. As I said, the presentation would be interactive, so feel free to jump in. So yesterday, the International Energy Agency released a special report, Net Zero in 2050, a roadmap for the global energy system. And this represents the agency's first ever effort to model a comprehensive energy pathway towards limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as aligned with the Paris Agreement. There are still some concerns over the modeling choices, and I'm assuming you would understand much more in this regard. But climate and energy justice campaigners are welcoming the report because it's a milestone towards reforming this body that has historically been inclined towards the oil and gas industry. So after years of pressure from climate advocates, investors, businesses, and diplomats, the IEA has finally released the first ever full scenario aligned with limiting global warming to 1.5. Pippa, you can click. You can find you can click once more. You can find the report. This will be shared with you afterwards. You can find the report on that blue line where it says the report states, but you can also just Google it. What's groundbreaking about it is that it says that there is no need for investment in new fossil fuel supply in the net zero pathway. So it's not just that their scenario involves ending new fossil fuel expansion, but it's actually one of their headline conclusions. So it's exciting that it says beyond projects already committed as of 2021, there are no new oil and gas fields approved for development in our pathway, and no new coal mines or mine extensions are required. The unwavering policy focus on climate change in the net zero pathway results in a sharp decline in fossil fuel demand, meaning that the focus for oil and gas producers switches entirely to output, the emissions reduction from the operation of existing assets. So in short, big oil and gas and their investors just lost a very powerful shield that they've been using for decades to justify continued fossil fuel expansion and investment in new oil, gas, and coal projects. We can go to the next one. So here just a very good visual from the report, but I encourage you all to check it out. It shows essentially it shows that fossil fuel expansion cannot be Paris aligned. But where's the catch? There's always something, right? So even though it's welcomed by campaigners to be that one of the world's most influential energy modeling, or rather the world's most influential energy modeling agency is announcing this, there is still some concerns in terms of how do we get there. So Pippa, if you just click once more. I don't know how much you're able to see this, but while the report notes that decarbonization of the global economy in the span of 3 decades, has to deploy massively all available clean energy technologies, such as renewables and electric vehicles and energy efficient building retrofits, etc., between now and 2030. They're also calling for substantially increasing and reprioritizing research and development, which is good. And they say in 2050, almost half the reductions come from technologies, and this is the concerning part, that are currently only at the demonstration or prototype phase. And the fact that the IEA's emission reduction roadmap after 2030 relies so heavily on non-existent technologies such as carbon capture, utilization and storage is very concerning and has been heavily criticized since they're publishing the report yesterday. So yeah, we can go into this, but essentially they're basing this on technologies in development that we still have not seen. We don't know the consequences of. And the climate justice movement and the Global South communities that have been fighting for climate justice for decades now are calling these undeveloped solutions false solutions. So, and they're saying that essentially we have the solutions here and now. Why not just use those? So if you just click once more, the way that the Climate Justice Alliance is defining just transition is a shift from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And then there are many definitions that, for example, there is a definition of just transition in the Paris Agreement, then by the International Trade Union Confederation, again, the Climate Justice Alliance, and also the Just Transition Alliance. But essentially, the concept comes from, is developed in the 1990s by trade unions who coined the term just transition to say that in this transition towards renewables or towards clean energy, we need to protect the lives and livelihood of workers and communities that are reliant and have been heavily reliant on the fossil fuel energy industry, who could unintentionally be affected by new policies aimed at tackling environmental issues. So it is now a term recognized and discussed by civil society movements. The environmental justice organizations and movements have heavily adopted the concept, and but it's also, as we will see soon, discussed within the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. So during the climate negotiations, but also within EU bodies. So the next slide, just one click. This I will open the floor for you to tell me, what do you think we need a just transition? We're a small group, so it's good that we just have it as a conversation rather than me presenting.
I guess we need it because there's been a lot of talk when this happens we should transition, and when this, and we're at the point now where there shouldn't be a point in the future when we transition, and just do it now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Saila. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, okay. The way I see the just transition is more, let's say, people-centered instead of technology-centered. So what we need to understand, according to me, is that let's say we build big power plants. We build big energy storage systems. All these storage systems rely on some raw materials that are brought from all over the world, and where you have this exploitation of resources and people who live there. So you basically leave those people in a very unreliable position, let's say. Lastly, I saw in Macedonia, for example, the new power plant that will be built, the 50 megawatt power plant. And I read something interesting from the company that is building that power plant, that they will requalify the current employees in the fossil fuel industry, all 50 of them, to be involved in the solar PV power plant. So I think there are also some, companies who see this problem and are trying to promise a good solution for the people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Pepa. Would anyone else like to contribute?
Yeah, like I think it would be a kind of a necessity or an awareness as a reminder, because everybody is talking about building up net zero community, zero efficient, sustainable systems. So I think because of just transition, it's a kind of a reminding giving to the outside community that this is a kind of serious pressing issue and everybody needs to address at right this point of time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sagar.
It's Chaluka here. I'm sorry I jumped in a little bit late. And I think that we have to remind that any development whatsoever in our society, and especially the energy transition, will impact to the local community. And so we have to take to remember that every step we will take towards net zero society will also have to deal with local communities. So we have to involve them and make it that also, as Petranka said, any plant installation or any other development, talking about the energy sector, will bring some benefit to the community, to the local, and in terms of employment or in terms of economic growth or whatsoever. Also including different ethical groups. I don't know if there's any other terms or better terms to address to this. I think I hope you get my point. And yeah, I think it's a huge argument. It's a big topic to talk about nowadays. So thank you.
Thank you, Gianluca. If there's no one else, we can perhaps go on. So just one more click, Pippa. Thank you. And it's something that I actually wanted to share with you, besides the very, very important points that all of you raised. There is a story that I'm personally connected to and that I wanted to share with you today. Namely, my partner's father has been working as an electrician on oil rigs for almost his whole life. And he's supposed to be retiring now. And right now so it's work that is very is structured in a way that is five. Sorry. Monica, would you mind muting yourself? Thank you. So the way their work is structured throughout his whole life, what he's been doing is to spend 5 weeks at home, 5 weeks on a rig. and he's changed several companies, but right now he works for a company that I'm not gonna mention, but they operate in Saudi Arabia. What happened last year, right before COVID hit, is that in January he was due to start his work 4 or 5 weeks on an oil rig in Saudi, and he did that, and then as we know, the world kind of was brought down to um, the knees by the pandemic. The borders were closed, and so he was stuck at work for 8 months, for almost 8 months, 7 months and 3 weeks, with only 2 days of 2 days off, working 13-hour shifts. He's a man in his 60s, right? He was, it's not like he had to be there. He was stuck there because the new guard could not come into the country because borders were closed, right? So for almost 8 months he was working 13-hour shifts, and the 2 days that he had free, he was able to go only out because on the rig they live there, they work there. It's not it's in the middle of the desert as well, so for him to rest those 2 days, he had to travel 8 hours away, and spend a day and a half and travel 8 hours back. And this whole time, so we were in touch as much as we could, and this whole time he was saying it's not like he can just up and leave, or that he can give up the job and resign, because he needs, this is what uh, he exists on, but also he was, this whole time he was afraid because this particular company laid off in the pandemic without any insurance 700 people, so over 700 people, and for all of the rest of them, including him, they cut their pay for 15%. And I'm just, it just really hit me how even their own workers are not currently in the industry as it is, they're not taken care of. So I just wanted to share this with you. He works as a senior electrician on this rig. After 8 months, he was able to travel back home, and he's called in again now. But the inhumanity that has happened and is happening, it just really hit close to home. We can go on. Just wanted to share that. So, okay. For the just transition to be truly just, there are a few elements that many have compiled together, researchers and campaigners alike. But essentially, the features of a just transition are multifaceted and involve a lot more than job security. And so the first one is safeguarding employment. Yes, the transition should ensure that people working in the fossil fuel industry are not left behind, as Pepa mentioned, through qualification, through requalification. But this involves also providing them with the skills and opportunities to obtain meaningful and rewarding employment in other sectors, such as those that will play a big role in the transition. Then true stakeholder involvement that I think Gianluca mentioned. possibly one of the most important ones and widely discussed principles of just transition. So anyone affected by the transition must be well informed and involved in the decision-making process of it. Then it's democratic ownership, which is the best way to achieve effective stakeholder participation through community-owned and controlled energy systems that put the people's and the workers' best interest at heart. Then through funding, governments and financial institutions have subsidized and bailed out polluting industries for decades, and that has brought us to the predicament that we're now in. And a just transition needs to involve both funding and government support, which will help bottom-up and participatory projects, allocating funds fairly and to those who need it the most, and reward ambition. As it is interesting to know from yesterday's report, also fossil fuels investment must not be further subsidized and supported. And finally, through regeneration and redistribution, and this involves understanding the historical injustices and damages done by our previous economies and righting those wrongs by breathing life back into regions and sectors. And something that is not here is something that Pippa mentioned, and that to bear in mind the transition to renewable energy and how much of mining and rare earth minerals would that require as well, from possibly communities that are not mined right now. I mean, we come from both Petranka and myself come from North Macedonia, and I come from a community in the southeast where copper was going to be mined, and copper is something that would have been is used in renewable technology. So again, we need to have those discussions. Okay, if we say 100 renewables, where are the raw materials going to come from? Who's going to be affected? Okay, next one is how does the amount of jobs in the fossil fuel industry compare to the amount of jobs in the industry for renewables? And in fact, cutting fossil fuel emissions has shown that would put more people to work than business as usual. And this would also happen at comparable wages. Fossil fuel employment has been falling, has been shrinking for years, but mainly because of mechanization, not necessarily because of regulation. So, for example, in 1980, producing 100 tons of coal per hour required 52 miners, whereas by 2015 that number dropped to 16. So even though more coal has been mined, coal mining has lost almost 60% of its jobs between 1980 and 2015. In 2018, there was a 2.4 million jobs in clean energy and energy efficiency, compared to half that many in the fossil fuel energy. And these are numbers only in the United States. So let's say we're putting a price on carbon. Installers, for example, and service technicians for solar and wind are forecasted to grow, especially with the political shifts, such as the Green Deal proposals that we'll touch upon in a bit. But not only we can conclude that not only is renewable and electricity already cost comparative with fossil generated power in many locations, but it also provides about 50% more jobs at a similar pay for the same amount of energy. Now, how do we enact it? there are a few examples that that big institutions and government bodies have done, but also there are successful examples at the local level. So in terms of the EU, there is a body that the EU has created, an initiative rather, which is the platform on social on coal regions in transition, and that is to help 42 regions across 12 European countries, or rather EU member states, to a low carbon economy. And this platform offers tailored technical and knowledge assistance and supports job intensive initiatives such as the development on clean energy power plants, e-mobility, tourism, and agricultural activities. Another interesting initiative is the Just Transition Agreement in Spain. The country essentially has a strategy of just transition, and it requires just transition agreements between the government, unions, and businesses in all regions affected by the climate transition. And these agreements support comprehensive strategies to offset negative impacts and finance green projects. The first of its kind, the first of this kind of deal was reached in October 2018 for the mining regions that have been impacted by the closure of 10 pits. And with that, there was a loss of 1,000 jobs. So the deal was to invest 250 million euro in mining communities by 2023 to support early retirement for miners over 48, clean energy initiatives, retraining for green jobs, and environmental restoration of the ecosystems of the areas. Then we have Mexico's climate priorities for the most vulnerable, which is connected to the government's new national determined contribution, which is a document that every country is submitting to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC. So essentially, Mexico is extremely vulnerable country to climate change. It's also one of the top 20 countries with highest levels of inequality in the world, and the administration has attempted to tackle these two challenges together, because it's all interconnected, and they have prioritized poverty reduction in their national development plan, as well as in their climate actions. So that's another example of the government stepping up in a way. In terms of democratization of the energy system, there are three very interesting successful stories of energy democracy in Europe. One of them is Tampere, Finland, which is the third largest city in Finland, and with a population of about 200,000 people. It sees very little sunlight as a town in the north, and reaches temperatures well below zero, but public lighting and heating are, of course, of the utmost importance for the residents. So through Eco Fellows, the Tampere Energy and Sustainability Agency, they've become an energy transition frontrunner as they aim to be carbon neutral by 2030, and have already outlined a plan to reduce their emissions by 80%. And the agency have set up cooperatively owned and run biogas co-ops in order to produce energy through food and agricultural byproducts. Local farmers are involved, citizens are involved in supplying the byproducts, and they control the way the plants are run democratically. The successful story from southern Italy is in the municipalities of Palma Campania, San Giuseppe Vesuviano, and Striano in southern Italy, where they have developed a joint 2030 strategy action plan for sustainable energy and climate, which is rooted in energy efficiency and climate change adaptation with complete citizenship engagement at its core. So essentially what they're doing is that they are in the process of setting up energy communities to tackle energy poverty in the area through locally generated renewable energy. The citizens, the residents, enterprises, industry, representatives, the hospitals, shopping centers, and public buildings all have the opportunity to produce and manage their own renewable energy. And they can use this for themselves, sell it to the country's energy grid, or store it for later use. And this ensures more energy security for the local communities at lower costs, and of course, much less greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, another example, local example that I want to share with you is the one in Križevci, Croatia, which is a municipality of about 20,000 people. And it's the first city in Croatia that have successfully crowdfunded a renewable energy project. It is a solar power plant that was opened in 2018. It's a 50 kilowatt capacity, and they have calculated that it will save around 55 tons of CO2 every year, and it will be used to power a local business center as well as feed electricity into the municipal grid. And what's very interesting about this project is that they've been tackling the energy poverty problem with it. So in 2016, they launched a pilot project which trained 13 long-term unemployed residents as energy advisors, who were then able to help households that have been struggling with the energy poverty. So what they did is they supplied them with equipment such as LED bulbs, window seals, with extensions to save water, as well as they advised them on energy saving behaviors. So the outcome so far, it's been that about over 500 households have been visited, and they have calculated that the community has saved around each household has saved around 70 euro annually. But that also meant over 16.5 thousand tons of CO2 emission reduction every year on a local level. So yeah, another interesting Pippa, you can go to the next slide. This is something that I took from the Climate Justice Alliance, which I thought is a very, very nice visual in terms of how the transition needs to happen from extractive to regenerative economy. But I'll let you ponder over it at your own time. And just finally, the last slide before we go into more discussion is the plans and the just transition in the EU and on the EU's periphery. Essentially, we probably all know the European Union has developed a European Green Deal and a strategy, and with that Just Transition Fund that is supposed to support this kind of activities. Then something that I mentioned earlier as a good initiative has been the European Commission's initiative for coal regions in transition. And this has been also a platform for the Western Balkans and Ukraine. These are all links that you can check out. And then as I said, on the periphery, there is the Sofia Declaration on the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans, which was agreed upon, which is basically developed by experts in the ivory towers of the EU without the decision making and local communities that would be the most affected from the region. But it was adopted by the governments from the region at the Sofia summit in November last year. But there are also very exciting green grassroots advocacy initiatives in the region, such as the Balkan Green Deal that has been developed, the principles for Balkan Green and Just Recovery, and finally, because I know of this particular example, there is the North Macedonia People's Green Deal that is based on collective visioning from grassroots groups and marginalized communities, which is in a way or rather prefiguring the processes that need to happen for just transition to be enacted. So that would be it from me. But I would invite us all to, I would invite you all to share your thoughts, if you have any questions and so on and so forth, and get in touch with me if anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona. I think we can start with Bea because she might leave us before 8 o'clock. Bea, are you still here?
Yes, I'm still here. Yes, so okay, so basically I have two questions related to, one of them related to something that you mentioned, and other is just something that I've been wondering after reading some news. So the first one relates to how would you envision this movement that is going on in Europe right now, so the Just Transition movement, affecting this, or yeah, somehow affecting or having the same effects around the world? Because, for instance, I saw some news about how, and you mentioned Mexico, but also I read some news about Colombia that has the same issue, but as I understood, there is no such just transition movements right now there. So I'm curious to know, I'm not sure if this is something that you would know about, if it's already a priority at EU level to also have some kind of cooperation with other countries to help bring the same measures to other places.
Great, thanks, Bea. Do we collect more questions, or should we go one by one? I can touch.
Maybe we can, if you prefer, we can. I can just bring my other one and yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so my second question refers to something that you mentioned about the importance of involving the right stakeholders and the involvement of the industry. And I'm wondering if, in your opinion, enough is being done to involve the energy companies in kind of helping this process of reskilling the workers, in particular fossil fuel companies that know already that they will be out of business, let's say, in some years. Do you think that enough is being done from the government side to motivate these companies to put trainings in place and so on in Europe? So those are my two questions.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, I will jump on the first one, and I'm not sure you can share with us the example that you read about Colombia, but I mean we're seeing these days what is happening in Colombia, and that is an outright rage towards the system that has enabled you know economic growth that that benefits the elite, that benefits a small number of people, that benefits profit driven CEOs. Many of them overlap with the CEOs of fossil fuel companies. So what is happening right now, we see an outrage towards a neoliberal system rather than just a certain tax. And I'm making this connection because we live in capitalism that is not uh, non-dependent on right, the way this even energy scenarios are made. What are the inputs of energy scenarios, right? It's always rise of GDP, economic growth, but how much can we really grow? How much of an infinite growth can we have on a finite planet? So I see the connection between what's happening in Colombia, so not necessarily a just transition driven movement, but I see it not only as a people's movement for their own rights, for basic human rights, but for futures that are decent. And we know that for decent futures, we have to have climate safe futures. So I know that is a big stretch. It's not. It's a very broad answer, but that's my thoughts around that. And in terms of the energy companies, they're not doing at all enough. We know that Exxon and Shell knew in the 80s. In the 80s, they knew that what they're doing, the extraction that they're doing, is causing the climate to change, and they did nothing. In fact, they did quite the opposite. They continued their operations as much as possible, and this has been it's been 40 years in the making. The UN body, the UNFCCC, has been around for 30 years now, and the emissions have grown. So we see a discrepancy between governments acting upon what they have to do, and energy companies, we can expect them to do something that would harm their profits. So there are very interesting studies done by Corporate Europe Observatory. I can write that down in the chat as well. But basically, these reports show how much corruption is there, and connection between CEOs and boards of energy companies, of fossil fuel energy companies, and people on very high positions in government and in EU bodies as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I had a question very similar to one of those Bea already asked. But yeah, I just wanted to know if you, Simona, in your point of view, which is the most important sector, social sector. I mean, education or policy making, or I don't know, welfare redistribution, which is the key to foster or to enable this just transition movement, because we're not talking only about the energy transition, but I think that just transition touch a lot of others sectors. But the main point is always to lower discrimination and to engage the communities, and to, I mean, yeah, to run away from this capitalism system we are living in. So, which, what would you do to solve a little bit this uh, not moving system? I mean, also, what we were seeing in Colombia is something very inspirational, because it's kind of hard to risk your life and go on the street, but people are like, they have to do that. And I'm living in Italy, and we are living, I think everyone is living in Europe, and we are not at that point, since we are still able to buy groceries. I mean, most of us are in that condition that we are not uh, obliged to react to governments. But yeah, it's kind of sorry, it's not a question. Just want to to hear other opinions. I don't know. Do you see any room for educations? I don't know. Maybe educate the next generation to live in a different way.
Mm.
Also, companies.
Thank you, Gianluca, for those reflections. I think so. As part of my doctoral study, I study socio-ecological transformations, and the definition of them is the shifts, the political, socioeconomic, and cultural shifts that happen towards a radical transformation of the systems that are interlinked. Um, the for example, the Green Deals, those are examples of political shifts towards a more radical transformation, right? So it's I see that as our crack for advocacy and lobbying. So there is a specific, it's not like in the States, right? It's not in like in the US, where the Green New Deal in the US is still kind of vague. It's still just a resolution. They're just starting now with the proposals, with the specific proposals. In the EU, there is the European Green New Deal. But what we can do is to really advocate towards more ambitious one, to kind of hijack that concept of a Green Deal, and not only push the EU, but also our own countries to have a more to have more ambitious targets, but in a just way. And what does that mean? Then that kind of goes into what you mentioned, like the different aspects, the social aspects of the sectors that can be involved. I think that it's too late if we're to wait for, I mean, this is not I think, it's what the IPCC says, right? The intergovernmental panel on climate change, the most established body on climate change of scientists from the whole world. They say that we don't have time. We have less than a decade to completely change the way we live, the way we consume, the way we think as well. Our worldview is based on this this binary of men versus nature and men versus women. There's no room for complexity. There is no room for plurality of visions of how low carbon futures can look like. And I think we have a lot of potential in working within our local communities. So, for example, what the energy democracy success stories have done, they have connected, for example, Križevci, they have taken the Croatian example, they have taken not only declining or rather to reduce their carbon emissions as a community, but they've employed people who have been unemployed, and it's these people that are forming, or rather that are part of the community, that are helping the rest of the households on how to do this. So it's something that we do now. I don't think we have the luxury to wait. It's all these examples that we might think that they're with very little influence, when in fact when they come together, the sum of them are very, very powerful. So that would be my answer, I guess.
So like a sort of bottom-up push from a starting with this local and small project will put light on the necessity of continuing to on that way rather than following the profit way. But I hardly see it coming in I don't know, biggest economies like US and China, for example. But anyhow, I totally see your point, and thank you for sharing.
What I would add to that, because I'm not sure this point came across. So it's not only the local. We have to do the local because it's also tangible results that we see right now, you know. And I think that is very important for not only an activist, but for a concerned citizen, for anyone who wants to live a decent future, right? So it's important that we have hope that this can happen. And to have hope is to do something that you can see the results from. That's why I think that's another reason why local actions are good, because they also prefigure, right? They embody the future that we want to see.
They make it happen. So
exactly. On the other hand, I think that has to go parallel with lobbying governments, because these big changes cannot happen unless there are, for example, the moment with the IEA, right, with their report saying no more fossil fuels. This is huge. It's a huge decision that can have a big effect on how we go forward. We can take that because it's an influential body that so far has been very supportive of the fossil fuel industry. We can take that and go back to that when we go to talk to our government, to the sector of mining in the ministries in our countries. We can say, this is what they say, you know, you can't do this. This is not compatible with a livable future. So I think it's important to work on all levels, and the way that we can do that, because one person cannot do everything by themselves, is to create allyships. So as yourselves, as ourselves, as individuals, as Yes Europe, to work together collaboratively with other organizations and push for further actions.
Thanks, Simona.
Hi, I wanted to comment on the thing you said about having local projects and how important it is. I actually live in Tampere, the city you mentioned, and I didn't have any idea that we were having that kind of projects. So yeah. So I think, especially in Finland, where people are not that interested in energy policy altogether and feel a bit like powerless in front of it and don't see their possibilities to influence policy making in the energy sector, we need to have like more openness and accessibility with our processes of decision making in that area. And definitely local projects help that, and also just having more clearer communications.
Wow, that's very exciting. But there's a lot around that and many other projects on Empower. It's a space, it's a platform where many ResCoops are sharing their stories, but also ResCoop. I think this was the. If you just Google them, you'll find them. But they're very, very interesting examples from their side as well.
Okay, that sounds interesting. I'll do that.
Is it Empower Financing? Something like this? Or maybe not, it's not.
I'll send you the link now.
Yeah, anyhow, thanks.
I think there's one more question from Bea, and I guess if we have some further questions, you can guys write to policy. What was our email? Right, I think it's this one, and we can send the questions to Simona. Yes.
Yeah, in terms of, I can try to touch upon Bea's question. I don't know if they're still here, but in terms of the just transition plans being prepared. So I think it's different whether or not we live in a member state, but I think contacting the bodies, the consortiums that prepare these plans can be very powerful, and just kind of say we want to be part of the process, because in fact, in the European Green Deal strategy, there's a lot about citizen engagement. So you can kind of, leverage on that. You can ask, what are your processes of citizen engagement, and just be a watchdog, but also see with their plans what communities would be affected, and ideally get in touch with those communities, so that we have an idea what's going on in terms of what the government is suggesting that community should do. That's I think the way I would go for it.
I just have another question. Are there any financial funds for just transitions projects? Do you know? Or, I mean, if I want to, let me say, create a startup or run a project with an emphasis on the just transition, is there any financial subsidies, in the European Union or wherever worldwide?
So, there is the Just Transition Fund that is a sort of part there to support the European Green Deal implementation. So I would suggest check that out, because I'm not familiar of how exactly it's going to be distributed. I would suggest check that out, but also really just I think there are many different ways of funding. Like a lot of communities in the Western Balkans have what they have done is started crowdfunding campaigns. So for the initial investment, they would the community would get together and put a few thousand of euros, like 3,000-4,000, and like if it's 100 euro by household, you know, it is manageable. And then they would put the crowdfunding campaign out there, but also talk to a lot of embassies. I would suggest companies that say that they're supporting the just transition, you know, like put your money where your mouth is. And contribute to the crowdfunding campaign. I know of a successful one in Bosnia, Solarna Pecka. Another one, Sunny Roofs, in Serbia. I'm sure they're all over Europe, and you can check Rescop and Municipal Power, the Empower, what I mentioned. But yeah, those would be my like very from the top of my head suggestions.
Great.
Thank you, Simona. It's already past 8, so we won't keep you anymore. So thank you all for coming, guys. I think this will be published on YouTube. If not, we will share you the video in any case. And then I shared in the chat our email, so you can write any further questions to that email, and I will forward them to Simona. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Bye. Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.